Welcome in to the Illini Inquirer Podcast. It is Jeremy Werner going solo today as Joey Wagner is doing great work in Indianapolis covering the Illini women's basketball team and their run in the Big Ten tournament. You may hear this after they play number 2 seed Iowa, but it's been a nice run, and Joey has been covering them really well. We'll talk about that here in a second. But I owed you a football podcast, and it was kind of just waiting for the media availability and getting some insight, a little bit more about Illini football. Well, we got a commitment to talk about in the class of 2027 is 4-star composite Evanston defensive back Justin Johnson joins the Illini class of 2027. The first in-state commit, the second commit, the first in 8 months since Cam Lopati committed. We'll talk about that here in a minute. And we were able to catch up with some new staff members, Roger Cooper and Ronnie Bradford joining Bobby Hauck's defensive staff, both with experience with Hauck back from Montana, and Tyrone Wheatley, Big Ten legend at Michigan, one of the best running backs in their proud program's history. He's joining as running backs coach as well. You'll hear a little bit from them and Brett Bielema about their joining the staff, and we get to learn a little bit more about this defense, a little bit more about these staff members. And today, we're recording this on Friday, we're able to catch up with some of the new players that Illinois has brought in. We talked with the offensive line and defensive line transfers. I'll give you a few clips from the offensive linemen today. Caught up with Jake Renfro, who's an Illini legacy, and Christian Martin, who Illinois really prioritized out of Colorado State, joining that revamped offensive line for Illinois. And I would be surprised if both those guys are not starters for the Illini. So you'll hear a little bit from them. We caught up with some defensive linemen. We'll catch up with some wide receivers and new quarterback Kaiten Hauser early next week. So we'll probably play some from them late next week as well. So we got a lot to get to. I do want to shout out Illini women's basketball because, to be honest with you, I didn't love their resume going into the Big Ten tournament. They had a couple quad one wins. They really didn't have any bad losses, and most everyone projected them to make the NCAA tournament. But if they would have lost to Wisconsin and taken a bad loss in that first round or second round, I guess, Big Ten tournament game, then it would have been a little sketchy. I just think they would have been sweating. Maybe they would have been in, but I think maybe we're talking about a playing game at that point. So to hold off Wisconsin and then to come back and finally close out a quad one win, because they had been so close against Iowa. They'd been so close against Minnesota, showed that they deserved to be an NCAA tournament team, that they played like an NCAA tournament team, taking those top 25 teams down to the wire, but just couldn't close those games out. So to do it against Michigan State, despite some faulty play late in the game with some turnovers, but to get the stop, to force a turnover by Blair, who's a phenomenal player by Michigan State, and beat the Spartans, who are ranked number 18 in the country, could be a host for the first round of the NCAA tournament, to beat them by 2, 71-69, to set up a rematch against Iowa, and potentially play yourself off the 8-9 line. I saw Charlie Cream from ESPN had Illinois as a 7 seed this morning. To avoid the number 1 seeds in this women's basketball would be massive for Illinois. So we'll see if they can play themselves into that 7 seed, and a win over Iowa certainly would add to that. So it's a fun team, man. And what a year for Shauna Green's program. She's now number 2 all time in program history in wins, which, yes, says something about Illinois women's basketball history, but also says a ton about Shauna Green to inherit that terrible history and to win, 83, 84, 85 games, something like that, in her first 4 years is an amazing, amazing feat. As good as Brett Bielema is, as good as Brad Underwood is, they did not inherit the disaster, quite the disaster that Shauna Green did after they had gone 7-77 in the Big Ten under Nancy Fay. So that's as good of a coaching job as you'll see in this program, as you'll see in the country. And boy, what's so exciting is this is Shauna Green's most talented team, which says a lot, given how good Makaira Cook and Genesis Bryant, Kendall Bostic, and Dahlia McKenzie, as great as they were, this young core is filled with a couple 5-star prospects, and Barry Wallace and Destiny Jackson, who are playing like 5-star prospects. Barry Wallace, unanimous first team all Big Ten player. Destiny Jackson is just turning into a star. Turns it over a little bit, but that's going to happen with freshmen, but just an unbelievable athlete, quickness, and she's just got that dog in her. Just the point guard you want out of Chicago, Whitney Young. She's lived up to all the hype. And then Ciara Parchment has the look of a future Big Ten Player of the Year contender, along with Barry, right? And along with Destiny Jackson. And then you had some nice pieces around them and Maddie Weber. I know they're really excited about what Manuela Alves can be. Aaliyah Guyton has really stepped up with Gretchen Dolan out with injury. And Jasmine Brown Hager has really turned herself into like a DeMonte Williams type presence where she's a really dogged defender, but also is hitting some big shots for them down the stretch. So it's an exciting program to see, and they'll be in the NCAA tournament now, and we'll see how far they can go. But the key for this program, just keep that core together, because I'm sure there'd be a lot of interest in a lot of those players. But if you can keep, especially that big three of Destiny Jackson, Barry Walsh, Ciara Parchment, there are bright days ahead where I think this could be a team that competes for a top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament next year, and eventually in Barry Walsh's senior year or beyond, like, even maybe before that, this could be a real Big Ten contender. And saying that about women's basketball at Illinois, it says a lot about Shauna Green. All right, let's dive into football. Before we get out of here, I did ask for some mailbag questions on Twitter, so I will get to those as well before we get out of here. Just give you a chance to ask some football questions because we've been so basketball heavy here on this podcast. But before we get to hearing from some of the staff and hearing from some of the new players, I do want to comment about 4-star Evanston defensive back in the composites, 3-star and 24/7 Sports. I think he's a 4-star level prospect, but he commits to Illinois, a top 15 in-state prospect. 24/7 has him as number 14. He's number 12 in the composite rankings. What a big win to get him out of Northwestern's backyard. I mean, this is an Evanston Township high school player, and Northwestern gave a great effort here. Like, they really, really wanted him. Now, he's got Illini ties. Both his parents are University of Illinois graduates. His head coach at Evanston High School, at least for the past year, is Miles Osei. Miles was at Nathan Shieldhouse's wedding. He played at Illinois from 2010 to 2013, started as a quarterback, eventually moved to wide receiver. But Illinois beats out Northwestern, Iowa, Michigan State, Minnesota. I know the program has raised expectations, but you should never get sick of that. Never get tired of beating Big Ten opponents like that. It's hard to beat Ohio State, Oregon, and a lot of these programs. Illinois got some wins over that. They flipped a kid from Alabama last year, but this is how you build consistency, is winning these type of recruitments, suburban recruitments, Illinois recruitments for prospects of this caliber. And to beat Iowa, Northwestern, Michigan State, Minnesota, among many others, is a big deal. But Justin Johnson, to be honest with you, like, the state is loaded in 2027 and 2028. But Justin Johnson is one of the better in-state gets that Illinois has had under Brett Bielema. I don't know if it'd be number 5, number 7, top 10, whatever, but it is one of the better gets. And he was one of my favorite prospects in this class, just because you can't teach length and speed. And he's 6'1", 6'2", 180 pounds. So already has that kind of Big Ten frame, but he runs a 10.6 100-meter dash. This is true speed that translates to the next level. And Corey Parker made him an absolute top priority. And to get him and to land him despite the defensive staff changes, I think is a kudos to Corey Parker and Brett Bielema and how they recruited him. And you're just adding more talent. I think he's raw. Miles Osei agreed with me when I caught up with him. I didn't even say that to him. And he said he's still pretty raw as a football player, only been playing since his freshman year, which is what makes it so exciting. Just the length, speed, quickness. This guy has, real high potential. He could play early if he does develop in his technique and everything. But long-term, this is a guy that I think, and Miles Osei said this, has next-level NFL potential. So getting this type of player in state and just continuing to stack that talent in the defensive backfield, because after Devin Witherspoon and Kirby Joseph get to the NFL and have some success, Illinois won some good recruitments. Now they're winning great recruitments. And you're seeing, like, DBU, that sell is resonating more and more. And in these past 2 classes, you've now added 3 composite 4-star prospects in the defensive backfield, and really from your region. You get Jacob Eberhardt out of St. Louis and beating out SEC programs like Oklahoma and Missouri for him to give you that next Matthew Bailey you hope of your program. I called him a souped up Matthew Bailey because I think he's a better athlete than Matt. And I think Matt's a phenomenal player. He's going to play in the NFL. So the potential of Jacob Eberhardt is huge. So to land him as that hybrid safety linebacker that I think is really going to be let loose in this new defense, that's huge. Nick Hankins, one of my favorite prospects Brett Bielema has landed at Illinois. Size, speed, combo, just a dog at cornerback, and probably play some nickel as well. That's a next level talent that Illinois is bringing in. He kind of reminds me of Quan Martin, but I just think he's a guy that could play early as a freshman, and it could be a starter, obviously, as a sophomore, and just gives you another huge addition to a defensive back room that, the talent outside of Xavier Scott and Matthew Bailey has not been as high as it was before, but now you're starting to bring more of those prospects in. Then you add Justin Johnson to that. And that doesn't even count some other guys that I think have potential, whether it's Zanai Scott or Taiwan Cox. They have some nice young talent. Andre Levette, I'm really high on. I think you'll see him make an impact. Almirian Thomas, I think was a really good find by Aaron Henry in the class of 2026. And I know Corey Parker's really high on RJ Jones III, who's a redshirt freshman who could factor into the 2 deep this year. So feel good about the defensive back talent they are accruing there. But I think Illinois should be getting that level of talent. So to see that, happen and actually come to reality is good. That means the sell is resonating, what you've produced in the NFL level, and what you have on your roster with Xavier Scott. Juice Clark is turning into a hell of a player who I think is going to have NFL potential here. It's good to see that pay off. But it's also good to see Illinois get off to a pretty good start. The first 2 commits in this class are 4-star composite prospects with Justin Johnson and Cam Lapati, the quarterback. But it'd been kind of a slow burn here. Like Illinois had many commits on board at this point in the class of 2026. Now they had a huge class in 2026. I do not expect a huge class in 2027. So I think they're going to be, a little bit more selective in this class, but you wanted to get that started because you got some big spring recruiting coming up here with unofficial visits during spring practice, then official visits start in April. And some good news is you get Cam Lapati on campus for his official visit in April 10th through the 12th, because boy, they are coming after him. Notre Dame, Duke, Michigan, all trying to flip Cam Lapati. He's going to take some unofficial visits to those schools. Brett Bielema does not like when his prospects take official visits, but these are unofficial visits. Nick Hankins took an unofficial visit to Missouri last year after he had committed to Illinois. So this is not unseen before, but sure, like there's some trepidation there. That Cam is getting interest and he's blown up. But I do think Art Sikowski has done an unbelievable job of recruiting him. Art gets bumped up to quarterbacks coach. The co was dropped from his title here recently. I think if Art Sikowski is here, Illinois has a decent chance of keeping Cam Lapati, but Notre Dame is a big name. I mean, it's a huge school. This could be an expensive recruitment, and I think Illinois will have some money freeing up, but it'll be very interesting to see if Illinois can hold on him. I know he likes Illinois a lot. Obviously, he committed to them. He likes the vet school, but now the big boys are coming in, and this is big boy recruiting. This is in the end, this is a good problem to have, that all these programs want your quarterback. That speaks to the level of quarterback this could be, and that's why it is stressful that Cam Lapati is the type of quarterback who could really lift your ceiling. The one positive here for Illinois is if you lost Cam Lapati, and I'm not saying they are, but if you did, I don't think that's the downfall of your program. I think this program is on a steady foundation, and I can tell you they are really excited about Carson Boyd. Like they think he can still push Caton Hauser. I would expect Caton Hauser to be the starter here, but Carson Boyd, they are very, very high on what he can do both short-term and long-term. And then Michael Clayton's coming in here with a world of talent as well. So you have gotten that talent. I just don't think it'd be like if Nebraska lost Dylan Raiola, which they did. Like it felt like Dylan Raiola was that program. Cam Lapati is an elevator. He is I think Ryan Poles of the Bears likes to call him multiplier. So like you can take that quarterbacking play to another level. The ceiling is really, really high. But they got some good quarterbacks here that I think can continue to play at a really high level for Illinois. But man, keeping Camel Potty would be really, really exciting for this staff. Speaking of the staff, we will get to them. You'll hear a little bit from the new staffers, Roger Cooper, Ronnie Bradford, and Tyrone Wheatley. Excited to hear from those guys. It was fun to get to know them a little bit. And one of these guys I thought was a really, really good spokesman for this program, and for this new defense. This new defense that Illinois is running, the 3-3-5 defense. So you will hear from them coming up next. But first, this episode is brought to you by Columbia Street Roastery. Our friends there have great coffee, and check out now their cold brew cans. They're smooth, easy to drink, and for your on-the-go coffee. I'm a big fan of their nitro brew, but their cold brew is great as well. You can just put it in the fridge, take it off as you go. Don't got to wait for the coffee to drip and make it, all of that. If you like that iced coffee, the cold brew, go check that out at Columbia Street Roastery. You can visit them at csrcoffee.com. They also have iced tea packets to make freshly brewed iced tea at home, including everyone's favorite flavors. And also you can try their Fiesta Mexicana. It's a sangria-like flavor with fruits of mango, lime, strawberry, orange, and peach to go with traditional. It's a good, smooth, traditional black iced tea. And at csrcoffee.com, you can get free shipping on orders over $45, and you can get 10% off your first order by using our code Illini all the way. That's Illini all the way. You get 10% off your first order with the code at csrcoffee.com. That's Illini all the way to get 10% off your first order with the code Illini all the way. Visit csrcoffee.com. Support our friends at Columbia Street Roastery. All right, it was fun to finally catch up with some of the Illinois new assistant coaches. We got to meet with them in the auditorium, Stu Levenick auditorium inside the Smith Center. So it was fun to catch up with 3 of them so far. And obviously Brett Bielema has been very busy with adding to his staff, filling out his staff, some other additions of note, and some new titles for some people. He brought in Mike Linehan, who is the defensive line coach at Montana. He's coming in as the defensive ends coach. So he will pair with Jordan Thomas, who comes from Boston College, to be the defensive line coach. Bielema wanted a lot of experience in that 3-3-5 defense, and Thomas played for Rocky Long at San Diego State and coached for Rocky Long at San Diego State. So didn't coach with Bobby Hauck, who's coming in here as the Illinois defense coordinator, but has a lot of experience in that system. He'll mesh with Mike Linehan there. But the guy I didn't know a lot about and hadn't heard a lot about, a guy who hasn't done a lot of media because they didn't do that at Montana with a lot of the assistants, is Roger Cooper. He spent the last 4 years as the linebackers coach under Hauck at Montana, and he was a co-defense coordinator last year. And we're trying to learn more and more about this scheme, this defense, how it's deployed. And Ronnie Bradford was a assistant coach at USC. He was the defensive coordinator at Montana. You'll hear from him in a little bit. Has been in the NFL for a long time. But I thought Roger Cooper ended up being the greatest spokesman and salesman for this defense. So let's just hear a little bit about Roger Cooper, because he was at Idaho State for many years, and he was a defensive coordinator. He ran a completely different defense. So he is kind of in the shoes of the current assistants, the guys who are retained, like Corey Parker, Archie McDaniel, and a lot of the support staffers, kind of in the same realm of them, of what it's like to switch to this defense. So here's Roger Cooper breaking down the adjustment to this defense and what this defense does well.
I was the exact opposite. Yeah. You know, this is where you belong on this play, hat in a hole, leverage. I was the exact opposite. So when I learned the defense, I did 4 years ago what the coaches are doing here now. It's like, wait, what a second? What's going on? So you adopt it. Once you go voodoo, you don't go back. Once it's in you, man. I mean, once you get the feel for it, it's tough to go away from it because it is so exciting. Yeah, I was the opposite. I was gap sound. Exactly, gap. Your hat's here, your hat's here, your hat's here. Picket fence. This is where you belong in every play. And sometimes in this defense, it's more about a feel and a cloudy or clear picture for run fits.
What makes it exciting?
Just so really knowing your weaknesses and knowing you make them your strengths, right? So you can pretty much tell on 3rd and 7 the first time you see a protection. You can kind of understand. All right, well, that's their plan. you can kind of go through their run pass stuff. You can see their run plays, and you can see their number one run play, and you can see how they run that against you. You go, okay, well, that's their plan. So it's always to have your second pitch, right? We pick our stuff off a menu, Rolodex it in, but then you always have to have a second pitch once you figure out how they're attacking you or trying to attack you.
What is the value of having a defense that's so different than the rest of the league? Like, how can that help you guys?
Preparation. So, not only does a team have to decide which stunts, which fronts to prepare for, which coverages to prepare for, they also have to decide how they're going to card that and how they're going to replicate that to their offense. So, and that is tough enough as what we heard. And what we like to do is, present a pretty consistent picture, but then we also rotate things in. So it's never in this front they do this, if they're lined up like this, they run this coverage or this pressure. So we're always trying to keep it interesting for offenses who are breaking us down.
Roger, everybody wants big, strong, fast, athletic at every position.
Perfect, yeah.
But what are the traits linebackers need in your system and in Bobby's system?
Yeah, we really talk about a field and the boundary backer, and those are kind of a mirrored position. And then you kind of have your middle piece, or what we'll call the Mike. And he's got to be a great pass rusher. He's got to be a great blitzer. He's got to be tough to deal with one-on-one. You want to isolate him on different people on the offensive line. You want to isolate him on the back. And then your other guys, they got to be able to play ball. It's the defense is kind of an equalizer. You can take your best athletes and you can put them in those spots, and they really just have to play football. They have to be good at football, and it lets your athletes be athletes. But big, strong, and fast. Yeah. Yeah.
You said when people get in and catch this defense, it's kind of hard to get out. Why is that? What is so compelling about this defense that when you get a taste of it, you want?
Well, it really makes offenses. It should make offenses uncomfortable. Now, it does make you uncomfortable as well too, because there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of pressures, there's a lot of stunts. You're rolling to the box from different places. Your force players come from different places, and once you kind of get a feel for it, it's not it's not so black and white like most defenses. You can do things a lot of different ways.
All right, I thought that was great insight from Roger Cooper. This defense is aggressive. That was a lot of my frustration with Aaron Henry, was just the lack of aggression, because even though it was a similar scheme to Ryan Walters was an aggressive play caller, a lot of man-to-man. Now, he had the talent to do that. I don't think Aaron had the talent in the back end to really, really do that. But there were times I wanted to see it more, especially on some of these third downs, right? We've talked a lot about that. This scheme is going to be aggressive, sometimes to a fault. And that's what Ryan was at times. Sometimes it was to a fault. And Roger kind of hit on there, like, sometimes you're going to have to be okay giving up some of those plays, but you got to run to the football, make sure you can limit it. Don't let it go for a touchdown, whatever it is. But they're going to be aggressive to a fault sometimes, but there's so much movement involved here. So we will talk about maybe some doubts to the defense in our mailbag segment. We'll talk about this staff that has been put together, but I just thought Roger, gave some really, really good insight into what this defense is, why it's exciting for him, and why they're excited to deploy it. So we'll talk more about my perspective on all of that, but it was just interesting hearing from him, because I thought he was a great salesman. I was saying, once you go voodoo, you don't go back. I got to dig more on that voodoo part of it, because I think that was kind of what they called it in Montana. And that's what I just like, that they're going to be aggressive and try to dictate the game more than react. And I thought Aaron Henry's defense was very reactionary. Ryan Walters' defense, no matter what the scheme alignment is, it just wanted to dictate the game on the offense a little bit more. And what Brett Bielema really, really wants is kind of what he had in the first couple of years with Ryan Walters, is that defense was different. A lot of these quarterbacks, coaches talked about, man, it's a tough prep. It hasn't been the last 3 years. Illinois is going to be a very, very unique prep moving forward. We'll see how long, but there's not a lot of 3-3-5 defenses at the Power 5 level, and there's none of them. There's some 3-3-5 looks, but nothing quite like this that they'll see consistently in the Big Ten. All right, Ronnie Bradford was a defensive coordinator for Bobby Hauck at Montana for a couple of years, was a safeties coach for him as well, has been a safeties coach at USC, has been in the NFL as a special teams coach as well. But he's going to be coaching one of the most important positions in this defense, which is the safeties. And he is really excited to coach Matthew Bailey. He said he watched the Ohio State game and said that game put Matthew Bailey on NFL radars. Even if Illinois didn't win, Matthew Bailey had a breakout game for a lot of NFL personnel in that one. And Matthew Bailey is going to be a really interesting piece. Xavier Scott is usually in with the safeties in that nickel position. And then you got Matt Krasevich, LaVon Williams back there at free safety. I think Andre Lovett can make an impact at some point this year. And obviously Jacob Eberhardt, once he gets healthy, coming off a off-season surgery, there's just a lot of talent that they have in that room. But they deploy these safeties very aggressively. They'll be in the box. They'll be blitzing. So I asked Ronnie Bradford a little bit about this kind of getting into a golden era of safeties where, you think of what Seattle did with Nick Eamon-Warry, and I would even include Devin Witherspoon, who plays corner and nickel, but he kind of plays, all over the place. Just the versatility of some of these defensive backs and this position. Kyle Hamilton with the Baltimore Ravens, the safety is being deployed a lot differently. So I asked him a few questions about that position and what he wants out of it.
Here's the thing. Safeties, communication. First and foremost, they got to get people lined up, not only themselves, but they got to get other people lined up, because they might not only be talking to another safety, they may be talking to the corner, they may be talking to the linebacker. So it's about communication and getting that across the board so everybody's playing the same thing. And I always tell them sometimes, hey guys, you might call the wrong thing, but if he's playing what you called and he's playing what you called, sometimes if we're all wrong, we can be all right for that play.
What do you make of just safeties? I mean, I know you guys are pretty aggressive with how you use them, versatile with how you use them. What have you made of the evolution of that position as you guys have been?
Oh, it's changed. I mean, guys, when I was playing, it was just different. It's a different era right now with the safeties. Teams are spreading you out 53 and a half. They got one guy on one side, one guy on the other. There's tight ends are running so much fast. You guys saw the combine. Tight ends are flying. They're running 4.3s and 4.4s for the most part. So that safety has to be very versatile from a run standpoint, but from a coverage standpoint. They weren't asking Steve Atwater and they weren't asking Ronnie Lott to go out there in the slot and cover a whole lot of guys. Now, here's the thing. I just said those two names. There's players in that that have no idea who I just said. So that's the most frightening thing sometimes, because they are always, it's a generation where, okay, what's next? Who's the new hottest thing? So that's just the situation. Things will evolve, and safeties have evolved, but it's a new game. I'm excited about it because I get an opportunity to coach it.
Yeah, it's just a really exciting time to be a safety if you're that kind of athlete. And Illinois got some, man. I think Lovick's going to be really good. I'm really high on Eberhardt, but obviously this year you got Matthew Bailey, Xavier Scott, kind of in the middle of that field. That should be an absolute strength of the defense, and I think Ronnie Bradford's more than qualified to be running with those guys. So, all right, let's get to the biggest name, probably addition of the Brett Bielema staff this offseason. I mean, Bobby Hauck is a big one, but everyone who's been around the Big Ten or the NFL, they know who Tyrone Wheatley is. And Tyrone Wheatley was one of the best recruits in the country. I think he was the number one recruit in the country when he decided to go to Michigan. Is an absolute legend with the maize and blue, and then went to the NFL and had a long career there. He's bounced around in the NFL. He's been in the NFL, coaching some really good players. Was Michigan's running backs coach for a little time, and then he's been a head coach at Division I level. I think it was Morgan State, and then it was Wayne State, Division II, the last couple of years. Didn't go all that well at some of those programs as a head coach, but he's happy to be back in the Big Ten. I can tell you that much. I asked him about what he learned from that, and he said, just being back here, appreciating being back at this level, because obviously you have the resources, and you have the resources not only to get good players, but to support those players and to have big staffs that can do all these things and win at a high level. So obviously the quote that went a little viral was him talking about his time in Michigan. He was asked about the dynamic of being a Michigan great and now coaching at Illinois, which maybe not a rival in football. Basketball, we can have a discussion. But he was asked about that. And listen, I like to live tweet during these things to give you guys some insight. And sometimes you tweet something out not thinking it's a big deal. And I tweeted a quote about him saying, hey, I bleed maize and blue, which I thought was kind of nice to hear because it's like, yes, Michigan's a part of him. And it was a partial quote. And in hindsight, I wish I wouldn't have live tweeted that because the reaction to it I thought was a little overblown. And I tried to then provide the context, but you know what happens on Twitter with the algorithms and all of that. So in hindsight, sometimes I wonder, should I, live tweet some of these things? Or wait until the very end and tweet the entire thing. So that's something I got to continue to go through. But I regret the reaction because I don't know if it was fair for Tyrone. But that's why I wanted to play his entire quote of what it's like to be the Michigan great now coaching at Illinois. And I think the whole context of the quote is far, far better than the single tweet that I put out there. So I think I owe it to Tyrone to run this so that you guys know exactly what he said.
And I told the guys when I introduced myself to them, right? Yes, I do bleed maize and blue. Not going to lie to you, but I'm here. As Coach Bielema says, be here. I'm here. This is where my feet are. I'm going to blossom where I'm at right now. I'm going to fertilize this soil, and we're going to grow. So this is where I'm at, So I do have a lot of friends who went to Illinois, a couple of guys that ran track, because I also ran track. They're happy about it. So now they always say, got to get your orange and blue. And I say, now here, call my one friend up. I say, hey, man, I'm here. So he's like, I haven't been back to Illinois in almost 10 years. Guess what? I'm going to come. So hopefully we're bringing the guys back in the fold.
I like that he says Michigan still means something to him. I don't think I think you can compartmentalize that in your life, just like Brett Bielema can compartmentalize Iowa. Now, maybe a fan could want him to say, hey, love Michigan. It's part of where I am, but I'm all in on Illinois now. You could have said those things, but I think he was just being honest. I think he was sincere, and I think he's going to do everything he can to help Illinois. I'm not worried about him trying to help Michigan moving forward, but Tyrone's got a nice history in the NFL as a running backs coach, and obviously as Michigan's running backs coach as well. Has had a lot of 1,000-yard rushers. But what was interesting, and anybody questioning whether Tyrone Wheatley wants to be here, he reached out to Bielema. Bielema said he was close to hiring somebody else, and there were some really good candidates for this job. Tyrone talked about why he reached out to Brett Bielema, and Brett Bielema ended up hiring him, obviously, so he liked a lot of what he brought. Here's Tyrone talking about why he was so interested in joining Illinois.
At the point in my career where I could be very selective in choosing who I want to work with. And when I saw the job was open, look at his track record. And as a running back coach, why wouldn't you want to work for a guy? Monty Ball, Melvin Gordon, those type of names that he's produced, those type of running backs, why wouldn't you want to work for him? Not only that, just hearing through people that work for him, mutual friends of how he is and what the type of culture he sets and who he is as a person. That's who you want to work for.
All right, good stuff there from Tyrone Wheatley. So there's a little bit from the new staff members. If you want to hear the entire interviews, those are on our YouTube channel. Go check those out. Just search Illini Inquirer on YouTube and you will find that, and check out all our videos of these interviews. He was very high on Khalil Valentine. He was talking about how Khalil Valentine is special, great burst, great acceleration. He also likes Aiden Lawfrey's burst. He said he can put him up, pick him up and put him down as a running back. Said there's a few things they can work on, but he thinks those guys can do really, really good things in the Big Ten. All right, before we get to your mailbag questions, I do want to play a little bit from the players. Huge revamp on the offensive line as you have lost 4 players, 4 starters to the NFL, and a couple of those guys will be playing in the NFL. But Illinois invested a lot in 2 transfers this offseason that I expect, along with Brandon Henderson, are likely going to start. Brandon Hansen's going to try and push for a starting job, but I think Brandon Henderson will be a starting guard on this team. But Jake Renfro is coming in kind of as the Tommy Boy transfer for Illinois. He did not want to stay in college for 7 years, but he will be playing a 7th year, just got approved for a 7th year of eligibility due to a lot of injuries in his past. But when he's healthy, he's a very effective center. Was a college football playoff starting center, an all-conference center at Cincinnati. That was now back in 2021. So early on in his career was an all-conference center, playing at a very high level for a college football playoff team. Transfers to Wisconsin, starts, I think, 17 games there. Had several injuries, but was a very effective starting center in the Big Ten. And he brings a lot of leadership. This is a guy who was a Big Ten Media Days representative for Wisconsin last year, and now he joins Illinois, where he's a legacy. His dad was Rick Renfro. His dad played on the 1983 Big Ten title team that went to a Rose Bowl. So he grew up going to Illinois games. And it's interesting. He was not recruited heavily by Illinois and Lovie Smith as a high school prospect. Brett Bielema recruited him a little as a transfer when he went to Wisconsin back in 2023. And Illinois recruited Avery Jones, signed him, but Avery flipped to Auburn. And a very, very public kind of flip that Brett Bielema tweeted about back then. And then Jake Renfro had committed and signed with Wisconsin at that time. So finally, third time's a charm for Jake Renfro and Illinois. I chatted to him about that and joining the Illini. Kind of took a while for this match to kind of happen.
Yeah.
What's it like to finally be here at Illinois?
It's great. I grew up an Illinois fan. My dad played here back in the 80s, so it's great to be home. It's kind of a dream come true playing for my home state, and I'm fired up to be here, and it's been a great ride so far.
Could you take me through the high school recruitment? Did you hear at all from Illinois at that point?
I did a little bit. Nothing too serious. I might have been a little undersized, a little underweight, whatever. But it didn't work out, and I went my separate way. But everything happens for a reason, and I'm here now, so I can't be happier.
I know your first transfer recruitment, Coach B said he reached out to you, but it was probably a little too late. What was that process like for you?
He came over to the house, got to talk to him, got to meet him, really loved him. Knew it could be a great opportunity for me, but it didn't work out, and things happen. But the main thing is I'm here now, and I'm blessed to be here. I'm happy to be here, and it feels great.
So I guess when he reaches out again, to have that pre-established relationship, that makes this kind of an easy process the second time or third time around, I guess.
It was super easy. I took, first day of the portal open, I took my visit down here, absolutely fell in love with the players, the coaches, the building, everything about this place, and it just immediately clicked, and it felt like home, and I knew it was the easiest decision for me to make, and it worked out great, and I'm super happy to be here.
What do you mean your dad? For you to be here?
When I told him that I was in his bedroom, I made the phone call that I'm coming to Illinois. I went outside and he started screaming. He was so happy to be coming home, and called all of his old teammates too and told them I'm going to Illinois. And it meant the world to not just him, but like the whole his whole crew. So it was a really special moment for me.
What was Illinois in your childhood? What did it mean to you? Like you said, you grew up a fan. Like what were some of your memories of that?
It felt like home. I remember tailgating in the lot right outside, running around, throwing the football, just having the time of my life. So then when I took the visit down here and I got to see all that again, I haven't seen it in a few years now, and it just felt so special. And it immediately, I had that click, had that feeling, and knew this is the place I needed to be.
All right, Jake Renfro fills a big hole. Josh Kreutz was a 3-year starter for Illinois, 2-year team captain. They need some leadership up front, and Renfro's a team captain kind of player. Obviously, only going to be here for a season, and he's going to miss spring ball. So there is a challenge, a little bit of that. But Brett Bielema said that once he's fully healthy, he's not worried. He's got enough snaps in his 6-year career that he's not concerned about him flowing in there. So I would imagine TJ McMillan gets a lot of snaps at center. It'll be interesting during spring ball who else they rep in there. But Jake Renfro was brought in here to start and I think be a high-impact player. So he's already developing a relationship with Caton Hauser. And this is a guy I just think you feel comfortable can be that important piece of the middle who's calling out protections, who's got that connection with a quarterback who's been there and done that at a very, very high level. So that was a big, big addition. Another big addition that Illinois is betting big on is Christian Martin, Colorado State transfer. Illinois prioritize this guy. They thought this was their left tackle for potentially multiple years to help replace J.C. Davis. And it's even more important because Aiden Knappich, who they thought could be the heir apparent after redshirting last year, he's had injury issues, has knee issues, missed most of last year. Brett Bielema announced earlier this week that he is done playing football, that he medically is not playing anymore. Now, his brother, Nathan Knappich, was another big addition last year, and he started at left tackle during the bowl game and looked great. And he looked great against Tennessee, but they imagine he's going to be the right tackle. So he was practicing there most of last year, looked really good at the left side, but I think he's going to be most likely the starting right tackle. Christian Martin brought in here to really be that starting left tackle. The PFF grades don't look great. I think he needs to add some strength, get better with that anchor, but seeing him up close, like he's 6'6", 310 pounds. He's got long arms. You see him on tape, the athletic, the foot speed is all there to be a really high ceiling left tackle. Started all 13 games for a bad Colorado State team, but Illinois loved the film, loved the potential of him. So caught up with him talking about how Illinois prioritized him and why he wanted to be part of the Illini football program.
Man, that meant a lot. That meant a lot, obviously. I had a few other places and, to consider coming out of the portal. But like I said, like just everything that they are, like Coach B is going on his 6th year here, I want to say. So it's culture, he did establish everything here. So I knew for whatever reason, I'm here for a reason, and so I'm very grateful.
How quickly did they reach out to you when you hit the portal?
Very quickly, yeah. So like right after the window opened, they were on it immediately. They pursued lots of interest. So I came up here on a flight, just seeing everything and fell in love.
What was that like for you when you were first year starter at Colorado State last year and a Big Ten school was knocking on your door so quickly? What was that like?
Yeah, the film was surreal, absolutely. I mean, of course I have a lot of potential in my work, but it's a blessing for sure playing on the Big Ten stage. This is the best brand of football in all of college football, so it's a blessing.
So Illinois liked him a lot. He said Northwestern, some SEC programs were very, very interested in him as well. So he was a highly sought after guy, and Illinois prioritized him right from the start, able to land him. They got a pretty good track record of evaluating these transfers. J.C. Davis, Melvin Priestley, it's worked out pretty well when they've attacked and tried to find some of these transfer offensive linemen. So be interesting to see some of these guys once we get to see them in action. All right. Let's take another quick break. When we come back, let's answer some of your Illini football questions. We'll get to those coming up next on the Illini Inquirer Podcast. All right, it's time for you guys to take over the podcast. I asked on Twitter earlier today for you guys if you had any questions about Illinois football. What do you want to talk about? So you guys responded. Got about 10 questions we'll get to before we get out of here for this podcast. But Kingsley opens us up. End of the day, do you think Houck's defense next year ends up being better than what Aaron Henry's unit brought last year, hoping scheme change mitigates roster turnover a bit? And what I would say, Kingston, is it better, right? Like that's the whole idea of this. And as Brett Bielema has talked about, you can't plan for 2027, 2028. So yeah, you have this move in mind to make a difference for multiple years. But the biggest thing is you hope it makes a difference in 2026 because you thought your defense was not good enough. Brett Bielema said yesterday, we weren't good in any of the stats that matter defensively. And it was great to hear that, right? Because objectively, we were talking about that. So Brett Bielema always knew this, right? So the fact that he sees what we see, that's always nice to hear. And that he's not blinded by the personal relationship here. They needed to make a change on defense. Is this the right change? I don't know. That's what this season, along with many other things, Caton Hauser, offensive line revamping, a lot of those things are going to matter the ultimately. But I think we have a lot of confidence in what Barry Lunny's going to do, that he's going to have not only a competitive Big Ten offense, but a good Big Ten offense, because Lunny's offense is not the only reason Illinois has won 19 games, but it is the main reason that Illinois has won 19 games. And Luke Altmaier and the players who have been here, the offensive line, all those pieces have been a part of that success. But Barry Lunny is the one that is leading it all. And Bielema has a ton of confidence in Barry Lunny running that. What he is doing, and just, I think why he liked the idea of a head coach, and a completely different scheme we've talked about. I think he liked Bobby Hauck, that he could just turn it over to him, because Brett Bielema has to deal with so many things day to day as a head coach of the Big Ten in the pay for play era, that he wanted somebody he could trust and just hand it off to and not have to, get involved in. And he had to get involved. He said that this year with Aaron Henry. Now he oversees all of that, but I think he feels good about Bobby Hauck being the head coach of the defense. And that's what we're going to see. Listen, I like the scheme is aggressive. I am just that type of defensive guy. I like defensive coordinators who are aggressive, whose teams play aggressive, because I think if you just sit back and be reactionary, I just think that seeps into players and takes a little bit away of their aggression. And I think that's part of what made Devin Witherspoon such a good fit, Kirby Joseph such a good fit, and what Ryan Walters wanted to do. And I just don't know, like the last years, like outside of Gabe Akis and Johnny Newton, who were great, do you feel like you maximized a lot of your talent the last couple of years? I don't. And that's what's on Bobby Hauck to do, because Illinois, when they line up, their defensive line is not going to match up with the best offensive lines in the Big Ten, just talent for talent. So the scheme has to matter. The scheme has to matter. The way they play has to matter. Now, I think their secondary could be great, and I'm very excited about what this defensive scheme can do for them. The linebackers, though, too. That linebackers and defensive line, you are not going to win just based on talent alone. So it is a lot on Bobby Hauck. It's a gamble. It is a gamble. It is a big bet of a guy going from the SCS level to the Big Ten level, because there is no proof of concept, right? That's where I struggle a little bit, is I can't say, yep, guys, I can't tell you guys, yep, it's definitely going to work, because we don't have proof of concept at this level. And I do think the skepticism is, if the 3-3-5 defense, at least the way it's run here, because everybody, as Ronnie Bradford told us, everybody's got some form of the 3-3-5. Illinois technically ran a 3-3-5 last year. I thought it was more like a 5-1-5, because they had two basically defensive ends as outside linebackers. This is really three off-ball linebackers with one guy who's kind of like an edge rusher, and then three defensive linemen. It is more off-ball kind of playmakers in this defense. But Iowa State ran it pretty well. Florida State ran it pretty well under Tony White. Nebraska ran it really well under Tony White when he was there. But just a lot of teams don't do this. But that's part of why they wanted to make this move is, if you're not going to be overwhelming talent-wise up front, and they don't have that this year, you got to be different. You got to be a little exotic, and they certainly will be exotic. So I don't know. But the goal is to be better. And if they're not better up front, then that was at least a failure for 1 year, and it's not what Brett Bielema is going for this year. So great question. It's one of the main questions of the season. Kilton, what's up, Kilton? Would you pursue the April official visit strategy again if you were in Brett Bielema's shoes? Do you think the way it goes from here on either way? So you're basically just asking, do they go with a bunch of official visits in April again? Well, they are. I think Brett Bielema, even if you didn't hit on everybody that you got in April last year, I think you wanted to get ahead of the curve with some of those recruitments, and it still worked out pretty well. Champ Smith didn't initially commit to you, but he eventually committed to you. Jacob Eberhardt committed. He was early. Jabari Barnett committed to you, flipped, and then committed back. So they were 4 for 4 in the end, because Nasir Rankin eventually committed from that official visit weekend as well. And then King Leggins, Tony Williams, Tony Belongni, Emilian Thomas, Kai Pritchard, they all committed. Now, you did not get Max Suter. You did not get J.C. Anderson. You didn't get Marlon Bright and Messiah Tilson. Now, I think Bright, Suter, and Anderson were the ones they were really pushing for. That's a pretty good hit rate, though. And one of the weekends Illinois really likes having those kids on here is Mom's Day weekend, because Brett Bielema invites all those moms back, the recruits and their families, see all of that. And I think that worked pretty well for them last year. I think Champ Smith and Nasir Rankin and Jacob Eberhardt were all down for that weekend last year. So they really liked that one. It's going to be a big April for them. They at least have one weekend. They're lining up a bunch of official visits. Cam Lopati will be here. Aiden O'Neill, a 4-star edge rusher out of New Jersey, will be here. Timi Alu, Georgia, 4-star offensive lineman, will be here. And then you got some in-state prospects, Mason Howellman, offensive lineman out of Lincoln Way East, Jake Thies, love him. Defensive back out of Fenwick, had an unbelievable state title game win over East St. Louis. Speaking of East St. Louis, Jabari Lofton will be here. Brady Knowles, wide receiver out of Texas, and Anthony James, linebacker out of Texas. I think they want to turn a couple of those into commits early. I like where they sit with Anthony James and Brady Knowles. With Jake Thies, I think they're battling Iowa, Northwestern. Mason Howellman battling Iowa. But they are one of the top two there. So, they get half those guys. You feel pretty good about that. And then so far they're lining up a bunch of official visits for the month of June. But they like it because they are doing it again. So yeah, Kilton, I think they're going to do it moving forward because it worked out pretty well for them last year. All right, Illini Isaac asked a similar question about the staff. Should there be concern about the amount of staffers coming in from one school and that school being an FCS program? I don't have a lot of issues because I think Ronnie Bradford is a proven coach, and he's coached at USC. He's coached at this level before. I don't have a problem with them following the guy who's going to be your defense coordinator. Roger Cooper's got a lot of experience. I think he's qualified now to take a Big Ten job. He was an All-American linebacker in the FCS, by the way. Mike Linehan is kind of like the second guy among the defensive line coaches. I don't mind that. Jordan Thomas, is coached at San Diego State. Then he moved to Boston College to Illinois. That's a natural progression for a staffer. For me, the question all comes down to the guy at the top, Bobby Hauck. Like that's the one that's like, he's a proven head coach. He's a ball knower, right? This is a really good football coach, but he's never had the defensive title, and he's never coached at the Big Ten Power 4 level. He's coached at San Diego State as a special teams coordinator. I think he clearly knows defense. I think he clearly knows game situations, but he's never been the main play caller. So that's the interesting one to me. That's the one that's like, we'll see. Right. Because you don't, again, have the proof of concept of that. So I don't mind like the staff they're throwing together, but it's the Bobby Hauck of it all, right? He's the biggest question because even though he's a proven head coach, he's never been a proven coordinator, defense coordinator at this level. So that's what I'm really interested to see how it plays out. Brett Bielema has a lot of confidence in it. We'll see how it works out. Bill asks, any comments from Coach B about more transfers in June? I got another question like this. There were no Montana players that really entered the portal. And to be honest with you, I don't think there are a lot of players that Illinois would have had interest in. Just that the talent is not quite at what Illinois wants at that level. I know it's all about the defensive line, right? I got another question here from JG. JG asks, please tell me they're not done adding pieces to the D-line. Hit the portal in May. Brett Bielema told us a couple weeks ago they still got about 4 or 5 scholarship spots open. The one I'm interested to see is how many players enter the portal from Northern Illinois. I think that's a clear spot where talent can make sense. The coaching ties to Thomas Hammock you've had there before, which shout out Tony Peterson getting the offensive coordinator job, going from Illinois State to Northern Illinois. Tony Peterson kind of pulled the Bobby Hauck, retired, and then gets a kind of step up job. So good for Tony P. But I think they're going to add. Northern Illinois would be the one I'd watch because it's 30 days after they promoted their coordinator. Then the players can enter the portal after that, because since they didn't do an outside hire, it's usually 5 days after that outside hire is hired. Then the players can start entering the portal. So sometime this spring, I don't know the exact dates off the top of my head. Sorry. But yeah, I think they'll try to add a defensive back. And yes, it would make sense to add another defensive lineman or two that you can add to that rotation and just add more depth. But yes, I do think they'll add offensive line. Wouldn't surprise me either. And there's still players in the portal from January, right? That you could still add eventually. But the only players who can continue to add are the coaching changes that happen. So Northern Illinois would be the one that I think is definitely worth watching. All right. Isla, that's my niece's name. Isla asks, Bielema commented that you can't compete with a half of $30 million. Think he's going to start looking at other schools with more NIL. Well, let's play that clip from Brett Bielema, what he had to say about NIL. It's a little bit longer, but I want you guys to hear the context of what she is talking about. So here is Brett Bielema.
And it's really kind of even going back to the first year. Like, I remember finding out retrospect, a year when I was super excited because I thought we had somewhere in the 4 to 5 million range. Teams were operating in 20 million. And I'm like, okay, so Josh and I had some hard conversations and just to get to where we needed to be. And, I was really hoping, and I think everybody else was, when the revenue share conversation came up, everybody's going to be in that 15 to 20, and I think, like I've always said, like, hey, listen, I don't need to be number 1, but I don't want to be number 18. Kind of like even with our contracts, with coaches' contracts for us, like, I'm like, just keep me in the upper half, right? Like, so I literally think it's insane, right, that we're talking about a 14 to 15 to $16 million roster. and realize that that's not adequate, right? Like just because exactly what you're saying, there's teams that have. I think there's quite a few teams in our space in the Big Ten that operate over 30 million. I think there's a couple that work over 35, 40 million. And it again just gets back to like, it's just, you can get by with a year, maybe two, but like competitively to be able to do that at half the value, it's not going to work. So hopefully we're going to get to a point in time where everybody can just agree to get along and come up with a number, whatever it is. Like, I'm here to play as long as it's all in the same fair game. And hopefully that day is coming sooner than later. And there's some guide rails that, don't allow those outliers to exist, but right now they definitely exist, and you see where they are, you see who they are. That's why I think to jump to a 24 team format, just like when it used to be 4, even pre-NIL, when probably people were NIL and when it wasn't NIL, right? Like it just opened the window to go to 12, and now you look at 12 and you say 8 or 9 of those teams probably are in the $35-40 million there's a reason they're in those games, right? And now if you can open up to 24, it would give that whole other wave of teams that who can probably go toe to toe with anybody on any given Saturday. It's just hard to sustain it for 12 games.
All right, that's Brett Beal. We kind of went to the 24 game or 24 team playoff that he is very supportive of. He wants more access to all of that, but at the heart of it, there's not a lot new that Brett has talked about, except acknowledging that, they, with revenue share, like they can spend $14 to $16 million on a football roster, and Illinois got some NIL. So they had money to spend, and they spent money but the cost of business keeps going up, and revenue sharing has not stopped. And the CSC and the House settlement has not stopped spending with NIL, right? Now, as Josh Whitman said on the podcast, I would encourage everybody to go back in January when I sat down with him, asking him about all of these issues. He said this is a big year for CSC to show that they actually will enforce rules, and there are penalties for breaking rules, that you can't pay somebody $100,000 in NIL anymore, right? Like, that's not supposed to be happening. Of course it is. And teams like Ohio State, Oregon, and it's not just that. Like, these top programs have a ton of money coming into them, and they're spending it on their rosters. And right now, there's no penalty to those kind of things. It's not to say other programs aren't, or Illinois, like they could all probably get away with it right now, because there's just not really an enforcement wing happening. Now, does that mean I think Brett Bielema is going to go somewhere where he can have that? No, I don't. I really don't. I think he just wants – Brett Bielema was a leading voice in college football coaches. And I think he's trying to get everybody on the same board in the Big Ten and the SEC, and all to follow the same rules at some point. And he's frustrated that they're not, right? But Josh Whitman's got a leading voice in this as well. And I think his goal is just to keep making sure that Josh and Illinois are keeping up with the Joneses and being aggressive here in this space. And I think for the most part they have. But I think, Brett, this is a legacy job. I think he just wants to make sure Illinois has the chance. And one, he's got to non-compete with the rest of the Big Ten. 2, he's been in the SEC. He's got a massive buyout if any of those programs wanted to come calling. So I don't see it. I think Brett Bielema just wants to make sure. I think his comments are just about making sure that Illinois has the opportunity to compete, and the rules allow them to be competitive. And I think they are competitive with the middle class of Power 4 football. They are not close to what Ohio State and Oregon, and I'm not just trying to pick out those schools and say they're wrong. Like, they shouldn't be doing this if they're allowed to do this. It's the system that's got to figure this all out. And we'll see if the CSC has the enforcement base to be able to do that. And as Whitman told me in January, it's a big year to figure out if they're able to do that. All right. Let's see. We got 2 more here that I want to get to before we get out of here. Lieutenant Thomas DeVito. Shout out to Tommy, by the way. 2-year with $7.4 million deal, $2 million guaranteed with New England. He's staying with them as a backup quarterback to MVP candidate Drake Make. Shout out to Tommy DeVito, one of my favorites to cover. So Lieutenant Thomas DeVito on Twitter. I don't think he's related. About my former state of residence, would you say 3.5 would be a good number, over under, for the number of top 20 in-state gets in the class of 2027? Well, let me go figure out. Let's see here. In the state, 3.5. I mean, that's a good number just off the top of my head. But if we're going by the top 247, let's see. I mean, Israel Abrams, they aren't recruiting. They already got Camel Potty. Jake Narat out of Arlington Heights, already got a quarterback. Myson Johnson Cook, I don't think they're very much in there. So top 10 guys, I think Braden Parks, they're in play with, but I think Oregon, Notre Dame, going to be very difficult to get. So I think you're looking at that next group. Raheem Floyd, East St. Louis, they're in on. I don't think they're the top school for him. Daryl Madison out of Morgan Park, I'm really interested. They're definitely in the battle there. I would imagine they get an official visit at some point. Cameron Wagner out of St. Joe Ogden, their backyard. Illinois is definitely in play there. He's become a national prospect, though. Very high ceiling. I think he's got to continue to develop. Mason Holloman, they're in the mix for. Justin Johnson, they've already landed. Keyshawn Taylor out of Rockford, they're in the mix with. Chris Caskey, Naz Academy. Soren Pfeiffer out of Morton's become a national recruitment. Like Oregon and everybody's come in there. 3.5, yeah. I'd maybe, I mean, we still got to see the official visits coming in here. I'd maybe be a little under that, but I just don't know if you want to look at that top 20 and just say that's the cutoff, because this is a really good in-state class. Like Luke and Jaychak is number 33 by 24/7 Sports. He's a hell of a prospect on the offensive line. Jake Tice, is it Tice Thies, out of Fenwick? He's number 31. Like, that's be a really good get, beating Iowa. David Hill is number 29 out of Homewood Flossmoor, defensive lineman. So, like, I get it. You want top 10, top 20. I just think this is one of the better in-state classes. So, like, David Hill, Jake Thies, Luke and Jaychak, those are top 20 prospects in some previous classes. So, if you told me over under 6.5 in-state in the top 30, yeah, I think that's a really good number, and I think they'll get their fair share of in-state guys. I just don't top 10. I don't think it's matching up with a lot of these guys. Braden Parks, I think they've done a great job with. It's just that has turned into Oregon, Ohio State, some of the top programs, Notre Dame in the country. LSU is in the mix there, so that one could be very difficult. And that's good though that you're in these battles, and Illinois has found a way to win some of them, getting a guy like Nasir Rankin, getting a guy like Nick Hankins. But it's still difficult to beat the Ohio States and that level of program in the world. All right, last one. Teddy Massey, hardest story you've ever written or covered. Oh, I mean, anytime you get something off the field, it's not fun. It's not fun for us to cover. You got to do the job, though. So, the Beckman scandal was really, really difficult to cover. The Terrence Shannon ordeal was very, very difficult to cover. I'm proud of the way we've covered those, especially the Terrence Shannon, because I wasn't doing the website when the Simon Sianovich and Tim Beckman and Mike Thomas stuff was going down. But I was proud of how we covered Terrence Shannon Jr. We covered it seriously. Didn't try to put any rumors out there. But I'm proud of where we covered that one, because it's not easy, because you're not making anybody happy with however you cover it, but just stuck to what we know as journalists and reporters and how to go about it. The other one is Bobby Roundtree and his accident. That was not a fun day to cover. And then obviously the death of Bobby Roundtree. Like, Joey Wagner was down in Florida, was supposed to meet with Bobby that day. And I know that was incredibly hard for him to cover, and I'm incredibly proud of how he handled that and how he talked to people down there and put his reporter hat on. So those are never fun. Favorite story to write or cover? I mean, going to these big games, like covering an Elite Eight is so much fun. Covering these bowl games is a lot of fun. But for me, what I love is covering the journey of a player. So, like, being able to cover Isaiah Williams from when he's a sophomore, like 5-star prospect, all the way through his recruitment, all the way through the ups and downs of his career until the moment he gets in the NFL. Like, that is so much fun. Like, getting to tell their stories and them trusting you to tell their stories. But I told Brett Bielema this when I saw him at Pat Bryant's NFL draft party. My favorite is covering the NFL draft parties. Like, being able to chat with Sydney and Chase Brown the first day they practice together, and then being able to be up in Canada the day they get drafted, after all they'd been through, after all their mother had been through, and to be around all their loved ones and to see them so joyful of their lives changing, all that work, all the sacrifices they made of their mother sending them down to Florida to get the chance to play football, them signing, at the level they did, and then finally getting together, going through COVID, not seeing each other, not seeing their mother for more than a year, and her surprising them at Memorial Stadium. And then, having the years they had under Brett Bielema after the struggles of the Lovie Smith era. And then to see them get drafted. And even that weekend was up and down because Chase, Sydney goes in round 3. It's a joyful night, but Sydney's worried about his brother who did not get drafted and is disappointed. And then to see Chase have his own day, that was awesome. Or kind of like Isaiah Williams, what I was talking about with Tip Ryman. I covered the day he showed up to an Illinois camp as the skinny kid from South Dakota that Rod Smith was connected to because he knew his grandfather, who was his realtor out in Arizona. And he works out, and Illinois finds a spot for him. He's a walk-on, the COVID year. And he finds a way to get on the field by his second year, and really his first year, and becomes part of the tight end rotation his second year and becomes their starting tight end. It becomes a 3rd-round draft pick. And to be there for that moment it all happened and to know his story and be able to tell his story, that's the good stuff for me, man. Like, I love doing this on the podcast. I love being able to interact with you guys and analyze things and cover these big games and be in the building for these big things and be around it. But to tell those stories and to see them and, get to know these people, like that's the stuff I'm going to cherish, whenever it's my day. Like that's the stuff I'm going to remember is the relationships you make, the journeys you get to see and the lives that you get to touch. And of course, you guys getting you closer to your programs. Like that's what we want to do. We want to take you in closer to the programs. And the thing I cherish most is not just saying, oh, this is what Brad Underwood said about this last second play. Like, that's good. That's fun. Like, I love the sport, but it's the people. Like, being able to show you guys who these people are and tell their stories and get their insight into who they are, and broadcast that to you guys, to write about it. And you guys get to consume it and get to get closer to the programs that you like. So maybe that's too much sentimentality for you guys, but it's true. It's how I feel about doing this job, and it's done us well. And you guys have been very supportive of us throughout that. Wow. Solo pod that went 67 minutes. I'm sorry it went so long, but I had fun. I had fun talking about Illinois football, and I appreciate you guys joining us to break it all down. I'll be out in Maryland for the Illinois regular season finale. Maryland's struggling this season, but certainly down the stretch. Illinois needs to take care of business to have a chance to be that top 4 seed. They clinch a top 4 seed in the Big Ten tournament. If they win that game and still have that 3 seed in play as well, if Iowa takes care of Nebraska, tough one for the Hawkeyes, but they've shown that they can take out Nebraska, almost took out Michigan the other night. So I'll be out there in Maryland. Kyle Tosk and I will do a podcast after that game. And of course, we'll get you ready for the postseason. I've already chatted with Michael Tulip and Isaac Trotter. We're going to do a postseason preview roundtable with those guys. So be on the lookout for that. But before you get out of here, if you're listening to the podcast, follow us, rate us, review us, wherever you get your podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the notifications bell. I'm sorry you've been looking at my mug for the last 60, 70 minutes, but we appreciate you guys joining us. But anything you can do to support us, hit that like button, subscribe, and the notifications bell. We appreciate you. But everybody have a great day. Take care of each other. And we'll talk to you next time right here on the Illini Inquirer Podcast.
Bye, everybody.